All right, hey, what's up, guys? Coach Mac, Play Fast Football here on a Tuesday night. Glad to be with you all here to talk football like we do every week: offense, defense, special teams, college, whatever you guys want to talk about. Completely open forum for you guys to talk, ask questions, whatever we need to do. Our season ended Friday night, so I'm now in the off season, like probably 90% of most other people are. So we lost in round three regional finals to a really good football team. I thought we played well at times. I thought we did a lot of things that we needed to do to stay in that football game. But I also thought we didn't do the things that we needed to do to win the football game defensively, at least from my end, from the things that I can control. Um, but again, when you get that late into the season, you're playing really good football teams, and we just played one. So off season now, it now comes into growth, development, research. How are we getting better? What are we trying to do to get better? What things do we need to do to get better? So thought we'd jump on to Wednesday night. Sorry, thought we'd jump on and no football on. There's no college football on, no NFL football on tonight. So pretty good night to jump on and discuss some things that are going on in the football world, things that we can talk about, things that maybe you'd like to research, things that you'd like to look at, things that we did, things that I'm going to research, things that I'm going to try and look at, and just our weekly check-in to where you guys can have a forum where you can ask questions, we can interact, we can do those things, right? Because every time we do regular YouTube live videos, there's no way for people to interact. It's me talking to a camera and then waiting for comments after the video, having no idea how many people are going to watch the video, right? So, it's one of those deals where when you do YouTube live, people are here. You can't physically interact, but you can ask questions, you can chat, you can do all those things, and we can get conversations going, via the chat. So, it's for me, interesting time of year. Obviously, when you lose, you're never happy with losing. You'd like the season to continue on, but the off season for me, at least coaching wise, play fast wise, the off season for me is actually a very big part of what we do, and it's part of the development of the play fast model business itself, the brand itself. It's also part of what I do from the video spectrum. It's also the way that I get to study the game. Um, I don't watch a lot of college football during the season. I don't watch a ton of NFL football during the season. Anything I watch is probably tied to any hard rock parlays or any bets that I've made. I don't sit down as a fan to watch anything. I don't sit down as a coach to try and analyze anything. I'm way too busy, have way too many things going on in my life that I can't really do that. So now's the time where you have free time, you're looking for things to do, you're trying to get better, you want to expand, you want to grow, you want to figure out ways that you can help your program and your own coaching career. So it's that time of year for us now. So um, getting into getting into what we want to look at, what we want to study, the things we need to get better at. Um, like I mentioned to you guys the last couple times that we've done this, and then through some of the YouTube videos that we did, we switched to basically a truer 3-4 system this year. Personnel wise, it was 100% 3-4. We were mint front, so we were tight with a fourth rusher coming from the weak side 90% of the time. We played some four down stuff, and it was a version of under front stuff. Same personnel on the field. We didn't really make any personnel changes, so it was just basically making the jack a five technique instead of a walk-off backer. But it was under front stuff when we had tight ends attached, and when we played some teams that forced us out of tight front. At times when we needed to get out of tight front, we would go to under front stuff. So, that was a change that we had to make. We made that change based on our personnel. We made that change based on who we were playing, what offenses we thought we were going to see. And, obviously, when you go to the third round, the regional final, and, you're one of 8 teams left in your classification playing football in the state of Florida, you would think that obviously that change was for the better. That change was successful. And, when you look at the statistics of what's involved and the analytics of what's involved, obviously that change was pretty good for us. Um, but each year things change. And now as we go into next season and I start looking at the offseason and what we need to do, we may need to change again. And that's based on personnel. That's based on our kids. That's based on what we do well. That's based on who we have coming up from JV. And like I try to tell guys all the time, if you think in high school that you have a system and the system stays intact every year and you plug guys into the system, I think you're a little bit foolish. Um, I think you have to have some base ideas and some base things that you believe in. But I think as a high school football coach, uh, to me, your worth and your value, whether it's an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator, a head coach, whatever it may be, I think your worth and your value is your ability to adapt to the kids that you have in your program. And at a lot of the places that we're at, those kids aren't changing very much. We live in a world in Florida of open enrollment, and kids being able to go where they want to go, but there's still no technical quote unquote recruiting. There's supposed to be no recruiting. Um, so you're not necessarily going out and finding pieces to say, all right, we got to replace this, we got to replace that. We're a 3-4 team. We need this guy, this guy, this guy. You're kind of building it around the roster that you have, and you're taking your JV kids and kids that were younger kids that helped you play. And you say, all right, with this roster next year, what do we need to do to win football games? Right. So, I don't think you can sit there like, as in the NFL, when your coaches change and your system changes, then all of a sudden the GM and other guys have to say, all right, well, we need to draft 3-4 bodies. We need to play this style of defense. We need to play this style of offense. Well, in high school, it's really not that way. You can't go out and say, well, we need to create these bodies to play this system because it's a system that I run. Your system has to be adaptable. Your system has to have the ability to morph and change and do things that it needs to do. Um, at the same time, you have to have answers. You have to know how to coach what you're coaching, but your system has to be flexible. It has to be adaptable. It has to be willing to change based on the kids that you have. And, your ultimate job description at the end of the day is on Friday nights, you need to try and win games with the kids that are playing football currently on your roster, right? So whatever kids you dress for a game night, you have to find a way to win games, offense, defense, special teams. So, this time of year when you start researching things, it's like, I know I'm still, you know, I love three high. I want to be three high. I want to go back and watch Iowa State and some of the things that the three high teams are doing. There's some NFL teams doing it now. But if that doesn't fit our personnel and it doesn't fit, how we need to win football games, well, then that's just research that I'm doing for my own personal interest. It's one of those things where I want to get better. I want to get more knowledgeable, but the knowledge that I'm gaining needs to somehow, some way show up in.
Nice pants on.
Oh, pajama pants. Thank you, honey. My daughter's talking. Sorry. So somehow, some way that needs to show up in winning games, putting a roster together, and doing all the things that you need to do. If it's just to say that I'm going to go out and study and research, and this is the system we run, and we got to fit these, square pegs in round holes, then that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So, the change we made was good to us. Obviously, the results were very good, but I don't know if I can sit here and say that that's exactly what we're going to do next year because players change, people change, kids move, other kids come in. You graduate kids, you have underclassmen. So we'll have to figure that out. And that's kind of, where we're at right now. So big bodies last year. So we built a 3-3-5 for this year. Versus having bigs, there's plenty of limited linebacker bodies and playing, pivoting to 4-2-5 halfway through. Yeah. I mean, I think some of those things. So like to me, depending on how you're talking about, like if you're talking about true 3-3 stack and not just 3-3-5 personnel, if you're talking about 3-3 stack and 4-2-5, to me, those boxes fit very, very similar. The numbers are very similar. I know a lot of people look at it and go, oh, well, 4-2-5 and 3-3 stack are completely different. Well, in reality, they're really not. If you play with six guys in a box and you have your ways that you handle 2x2 and where you got to walk guys out and who your overhangs are, and you have variations of coverage that you play behind it. If you're a quarters toolbox or a split field coverage team, or if you're a 3 deep Ripley's match team, 6 in the box is 6 in the box. And that's usually where, to me, where I think you've got to kind of, figure out the system that you are. If you're an old school 4-3 team and you've always got 7 guys in the box for certain looks and you're not used to playing 5 or 6 in the box, well, that's a difference. If you're a 3-4 team that always has a 3-2 box and that's how you play everything versus, no matter what you see, you try to keep a 3-2 box, then that's a different thing. 3-3, 4-2-5, I think you have 6-man boxes a majority of the time. And, yes, one is an odd front. Yes, one is an even front. Yes, some of the block rec and how you handle things may change. Yes, having 2 open B gaps is different than having 1 open B gap. But, at the end of the day, a 6-man box is a 6-man box, and you're going to fit runs similarly, and you're going to try and send runs to the people you need to send them to. It's a very similar structure, in my opinion. And at least for me, being both of those teams and being a 4-2-5 team and a 3-3 stack team, I look at both of those things to be extremely, extremely similar. The 3-4 stuff that we do now is way different than some of the other stuff that we did when we were a 3-3 stack team and a 4-2-5 team, because the box looks are different. So like if we play an 11 personnel team right now, we play with a 3-2 box. When we were a 4-2-5 team, we probably played with a 4-2 box. When we were a 3-3 stack team, we played with a 3-3 box, and now we play with a 3-2 box. So, to me, that's where the some of the differences are as far as those things are concerned. Schematically, yes, they're different, but 3-3, 4-2-5 to me, if you're a 3-3 stack team and you're a 4-2-5 team, you're handling the box to me, numbers wise, in similar fashion. Yeah, so I mean, if you handle it that way, Matt, it's like, all right. So if it's 2x2, you get into a 3-1 box, and then you walk out apexes, and you can be 2 high behind it with a middle safety, however you want to do it. If you're a 3 high team, but a lot of the times when you get the heavier personnel groups, it ends up being a 3-3 box, or however you handle it. If you're a 3-3 stack team, usually for us, when we were a 3-3 stack team, if we saw 2x2, we would walk out one of the overhangs, not both overhangs. So the nickel would be down to one side. That stack backer wouldn't have to go anywhere, so he would still stay stacked. So we would look more like a 3-2 box, but from a 3-3 stack perspective. And then we would 2-gap the weak side guy where the overhang or the will linebacker had to walk out to, so that we could play all of our split field coverage stuff. So, now when we were a 3 high team, if you were a 2x2, yes, we were a 3-1 box, and we had a will linebacker and a nickel linebacker that were apexed, and we had safeties that were playing quarters, and then we had a middle safety that fit, just like you kind of mentioned, like a hybrid linebacker. So, that was the nuance in the 3 high system. When we were a 3-3 stack team, we kept 6 in the box as long as we could. And if you made us get out of that, then we would walk out an apex guy, or for us, it was a will or a nickel backer. And then we would 2-gap, or we would stunt the 5 technique or the open side to get us out of an open B gap, or to try and not have 2 open B gaps every single time we played. So, again, those are all, the more you talk to people about defense and football and everything else, those are all like the arguments that people have about 3-3-5. Like, right now in the area I'm in, and in college football, FSU just hired the defensive coordinator from Nebraska, right? Tony White, who was at Syracuse before that. He's got ties to I think New Mexico and other 3-3-5 people. So, now everybody on social media and everybody on the internet wants to talk about FSU hired a 3-3-5 guy. If you watch Nebraska play, you will almost never see a 3-3 stack box. So, if you want to talk 3-3 stack, or if you want to talk 3-3-5, those are 2 completely different conversations. And I think people missed the boat on that. I've done 15 different YouTube videos on it. I think people missed the boat between schematics and personnel. And, I think people get themselves really, really worked up and confused over what those things are, because, you have to say that somebody's a 3-3 stack coach or a 3-3 stack team before you can say somebody's a 3-3-5 personnel guy. And again, turn on Nebraska games. You'll almost never see 3-3 stack. Yeah, you'll see it a few times here or there, but if you watch them play rep in, rep out, it will not look like traditional 3-3 stack, but they're a 3-3-5 team. So, again, that's semantics, however you want to look at it, however you want to argue it. To me, it's kind of a waste of time as far as like social media arguments, shit like that. It's a waste of time. When it comes to you talking to somebody about how they want to play defense, I think it's certainly a more valuable conversation from the structure of the defense, right? So if you're talking to somebody that says, hey, we want to be a 3-3-5 team, or you're talking to somebody that says, hey, we want to be a 3-3 stack team, I think those are two completely different conversations. And then you have to kind of find out from there where that conversation is going, because I think those things to me are completely different. But social media, college football talk, trends, hires, fires, recruiting, schematics, all that shit, people get involved and then they get all freaked out about, hey, we just hired a 3-3-5 guy. Well, you didn't hire a 3-3 stack guy. That's not really what they do. They've morphed, they've changed. They play with that personnel group on the field, but they do a bunch of shit, and it rarely looks like 3-3-5. So, people that think they're FSU fans, or they think that they just hired a 3-3 coach and they're going to play 3-3 defense, which Florida State has never done, I think they're in for a pleasant but rude awakening, because that's not going to be what that structure is. So, and it's the same thing for us. So our personnel dictated that 3-4 was better for us, so we went to 3-4. Next year, I think we're actually a better 4-down team. I think we would probably be better as a 4-2-5 team. With that being said, our personnel is probably more 4-3. So, we would be more of a 4-3 team with 4-2-5 principles, but we have to play coverages based on the fact that we're a 4-3 team, which is one of the changes that we had to make this year. We're a 3-4 team, and our coverages were based on the fact that we were playing with 4 linebackers and 2 safeties. We were not playing with 3 safeties. So, 3-by-1 deals had to change. Certain things that we were doing to spread teams had to change. Couldn't ask the nickel and the jack to do things that safeties would do, because they weren't safeties. They were linebackers, right? So from a coaching standpoint, that's on me. That's on you. That's on coordinators. That's on coaches involved to understand the groups that they're in and the groups that they're playing on the field. So, for us next year, we are probably a 4-3 personnel team to put our best guys on the field. But I would like to play with more 4-2-5 principles. But there's certain things I cannot do versus certain sets with coverage, because I have a Sam linebacker and not a nickel, right? So, those are, again, the little nuances, the little things that you talk about all the time, that I think people need to kind of understand when they talk about structure, scheme, personnel, football, however you want to look at it. So, for the longest time, the place that I'm at before I got there, while I was there, was always an odd front school. It was always odd front personnel. We always could find linebackers and safeties before we could find D linemen. Well, it just so happens that right now, with the group that we had that went to the 3rd round, we rotated 10 different defensive linemen and 9 of them come back. Obviously we were rotating them as noses and 4 eyes. So it's not the same as some of the traditional 4-down stuff, but we had 9 kids that we rotated on the defensive line, 10 that we rotated, 9 that come back, or at least 8 that come back. And you would think that with 8 defensive linemen, you could probably play 4 down. Well, the issue with that is if 6 of those defensive linemen are 2 eyes or 3 techniques, and only 2 or 3 of them are defensive ends, that doesn't necessarily mean you can be a 4-down team, right? If you're a 4-down team, you probably need 4, at least 3, if not 4 defensive ends. And then you need probably 4 interior bodies, depending on where you play football, rotations, do those kids play offense, all those things that we got to think about in high school, right? But, for us, we played a bunch of D linemen this year, and we got a bunch of D linemen reps in quality football games. We got a bunch of D linemen reps 3 rounds deep in the playoffs. So I feel like we're almost better as a 4-down team next year. The question is, do we have enough defensive ends? And then, personnel wise, does that fit the kids that we have, is that in their best interest? Is that in the best interest for us to win games? Is that in the best interest for them to play a position that is going to showcase them, to possibly be college football players? And I know that as a high school coach, you probably don't base your scheme around showcasing guys, but at the same time, I got to figure out if those kids can play those positions. Certain kids that I think can they do that? We have the interior, the 2-eye and the 3 technique. We have 5 or 6 of those we could roll with tomorrow. They all played this year. They all played nose or 4-eye. I think they could all be interior kids. I think we have 2 5 techniques to play 4 down that are really, really good, and I think could help us a ton and could probably help themselves a ton in recruiting if they played as 5 techniques. But I don't know if we have enough bodies behind them to do that. The good thing is if we shifted to 4 down, we still play split field. We still play quarters toolbox. Nothing changes from that standpoint. Pressures may change a little bit because even though the jack linebacker that we played this year will probably be one of those defensive ends, and if we were 4 down, I don't know how much I like dropping those guys in high school from a down position. As I'd much rather walk them off as a weak side outside backer than I would drop them from on the line of scrimmage. We don't have enough time to coach that. We don't get enough reps to coach that. I think pressure wise, I like us better as an odd front team. But in all due respect, that's why people play odd, right? Like when you talk to big time coaches, when you go through the Kirby Saban deal of how they went to min front and odd front and other things in 3-4 personnel. And, it's because he went out and after they lost to Ohio State at Alabama, they went out and visited Tom Herman, who was then the head coach at Houston, and Todd Orlando was his defensive coordinator. And they talked to Todd Orlando about a couple things and asked him about odd front stuff. And he said, well, here's why we like it. And, 2 of the deals were very simple. You have more back end bodies. You have more speed on the field. You have more athletes on the field. And then there's more depth to the defense. And what he meant by that was, the disguise, the looks, the pressures, the things that you can do from, odd front 3-4 stuff is there's way more depth to it than even front stuff. Right. So that's kind of where they went with that and how they morphed into min front and tight front and doing some different things that are different than their traditional. Alabama was always had the ability to be a 3-4 Okie team, a 2-gap team most of the time, but they would do different things for a spread. They would get into 4 down, and then teams would force them to get into 4 down by going spread, and it kind of, there's if you do your research on all those changes from Saban and Kirby and Alabama's defense over the years, that's kind of where all that stuff comes from. So, but it's just interesting when they went to talk to Todd Orlando and Tom Herman, and they talked about depth in the defense being more multiple, pressures being different, who the 4th rusher is different. A lot of deals like that, and having more back end players. Those are the things that they talked about and why they made the change and why they thought that was better for them to do. So, I still agree with that. That's obviously still a big part of what we do and how we do it. But I think we're in a situation now at the school that I'm at that we're closer to 4 down than we've been to 3 down. The back end would not change. We would still play all of our quarters deals, all of our quarters toolbox. A lot of our base coverage would stay the same. So, again, for us, even coming off the season and the success that we've had, I think it's certainly feasible that we could make a change. We could become a 4 down team. And, a lot of people would probably say you're crazy after having that type of success. Why would you switch what you're doing? You have a lot of returning players. Why would you switch what you're doing? And, my answer would be we're switching because there's pieces that we have to fill. And there's kids that we have to play at those pieces that I don't know if they fit in what we did. And my job is to put us in something that is most advantageous and beneficial to us to win games. So that's why we would do what we do. And that's why now in the offseason, to get back to the original point of what we were talking about in the offseason, that's why you have to study what you need to study. You need to figure out how you're going to get better as a coach. But at the same time, you need to figure out how many of those things you're going to be able to play. How many of those things are you going to be able to do? A lot of guys study stuff on offense and they study all this, you know, all the new stuff that's out there and all the great stuff that's out there. Well, if you can't run that at your place, you're studying that just so you can have a conversation at a party, or you're studying that just so maybe down the road you could use it somewhere. Or, knowledge is never going to hurt you as a coach. There's no such thing as learning something and getting worse. Where it hurts you is when you think you need to apply all that knowledge into certain settings. And then that hurts you and your players because you really don't need all of those things at that time. You need to do the things that can win you football games. So, as far as coaching and you growing and learning and doing things, knowledge is never going to hurt you. It's always going to be a good thing. But I think the hardest thing for younger guys to understand is, where do we apply that knowledge? Just because I learned it doesn't mean I got to input it or install it. Just because I saw it somewhere and just because it makes sense to me doesn't mean we have to use it in our program, right? Our goal as coaches and our job description is we got to do the things that we need to do with the kids that we have. And, that's always in the off season going to be kind of the conundrum that we are in. So, for me, it's going to be, I'll still look at Iowa State. I'm really interested in looking at what Nebraska did this past year and getting a deeper dive into what they did, because now obviously if that guy's at FSU, he's 2.5 hours down the road, visits, being able to talk, possibly getting there, going to practices. So, obviously that's going to be a big deal. But I've always kind of tried to watch people play defense that do it with less talent. I'm an Alabama fan. I've always been an Alabama fan, but I don't study Alabama on defense. I don't think we could play that stuff in high school. I don't think we have the dudes to play some of the things that they do. I think some of the things that they do are obviously way too detailed for what we do. So I've never really studied it. I don't analyze it. I don't get into it. I've always tried to look at the places that are doing a lot with maybe less than other people have, because those are the coaching jobs that I've been tied to for 25 years. And I need to figure out how we can do more with less, and how we can put ourselves in a situation where our kids can not only understand what we're doing, but it's for them the best thing possible for their skill set, for their size, for their speed, mobility, agility. So I've always tried to find the teams that maybe shouldn't be a top defense, and I kind of scroll through NCAA statistics, and I go through different numbers, and I try to figure out statistically who is the best. And, you kind of go from there. It's not an exact science, but at the same time, it's a little bit better than just saying, all right, well, these are definitely the best defensive teams, and it's these 6 schools. And all right, well, if these 6 schools have types of dudes that we don't have, and we might not be able to do the things that they do, we need to kind of find the people that are doing some really good things with kids that are similar to ours. And that's always, for me, at least in the off season, where I've kind of matriculated or navigated myself to. It's like, all right, how do I find these teams that I think are doing things that are very similar to a roster that we could, put out there? How, who are the teams that are doing things with not, quote unquote, not all the 5 stars, not all the dudes. So I really don't know who that's going to be this year right now. I haven't spent enough time in the offseason looking at that to figure out exactly who that's going to be. I would think, to me, one of the ones that would pop into my mind early would be Indiana. I think obviously, Indiana's got some really good players and they probably have a really good roster, but I don't think anybody expected them to have the roster that they have to compete the way they've competed. I would think Vanderbilt is probably a really good place to look, as far as the types of things they're doing on defense with the success that they had this year. And obviously I think everybody with Vanderbilt is going to gravitate to the option stuff and what they did on offense, but I still think they played good enough defense with the kids they had to win. So I would think Vanderbilt would probably be a good one to look at. It'd be interesting to look at SMU and see the things that SMU does on defense. I know everybody with Rhett Lashley is kind of tied to what they do on offense and how they play on offense. But to me, any of those schools that have somehow overachieved, somehow put themselves in the limelight from a situation that nobody thought they would be in the limelight from. Um, I would be willing always to look at schools like that because I think that fits our mode a little bit more than maybe some other people's modes, right? So, um, that's just the way I look at it. That's the way I kind of analyze it. I break it down. Those are the things that I try to do in the off season. Some of the things that I think about in the off season. I'm really this year. I want to spend a ton of time on special teams. I had a chance this past season to coordinate 3 of the deals that we did. I did kickoff, I did punt block, and field goal block. And I think for me, in my profession, where I am in the profession, I think that's a place that I could 1000% get better at. And I want to study the new things that are out there, how people are doing things, how people are getting after shield punts, how people are getting after pro punts, if people are setting up returns, what they're doing to set up those returns. Kickoff coverage, obviously having to do that. We were covering kicks this year with a kid that couldn't get it out of the back of the end zone very often unless we were extremely downwind. So coverage was a huge deal. Placement of kicks was a huge deal. Trying to use a variation of several different kicks was a big deal. So that's, to me, kickoff coverage is one that I'm extremely interested in. Kick return stuff, even though I wasn't in charge of it this year, I think kick return stuff is a huge part of the game. I think there's a lot of great stuff going on in punt situations right now with multiple formations and how you can hide and disguise guys to get eligible for fakes and how you can change coverage lanes and, what your gunners are doing, how you can motion guys, how you can go from 2-man shields to 3-man shields or spread looks. That to me, and the way I kind of think about that is you got to look at it the same way you look at offense and defense, right? If you're willing to be different, if you're willing to be multiple, if you're willing to try and do things on offense or defense, then you should be the same way in special teams. There's no reason why you shouldn't be multiple, different, trying to create avenues for you to win on special teams that are not everyday walk of life, right? Like you should be trying to find ways to do muddle huddle stuff and swinging gate stuff and trying to find ways to steal points on field goal and trying ways that if you don't steal a point, by the time you shift, they don't rush because they're so worried about your other formations. I think punt wise, you should be multi-formational and change the look for guys week in and week out for how they want to get after your punts. And, the more for me, like when I'm doing punt block stuff, the more punt looks a team shows on film, the less confident I am about the blocks that we have because I'm not really sure which blocks are good versus certain looks, right? So, it's tough to have enough time in high school to say that we're going to have these 3 different punt block looks and they're all dependent upon how they're going to punt. Impossible, no. But with the amount of time that we get on special teams, how confident am I in thinking that we're going to have 3 different punt block looks with the same 11 personnel guys on the field? The same 11 dudes are in all those looks. And if they come out in 3 different punt looks, we have 3 different punt blocks. I'm not really comfortable with that. So I know for me, when I was doing punt block stuff, the more multi-formational people were, any teams that use motion or move guys around, that really puts a little bit of a damper on your punt block stuff because you're scared to death of what you have to defend formationally. And you don't want to give the other team the ball back if you got to stop. If your defense got off the field, you don't want to give them the ball back because you give up a fake or you don't cover a formation. So, that to me is something that's a little bit tougher to do. So I think as far as a punt team is concerned, I think your advantage as a punt team is being multi-formational, having guys eligible at different spots that change up who can release and who we have to cover, motioning guys, and moving guys around that you have to run with and you have to be able to cover. And to me, it makes teams prepare more, makes them spend more time on covering things and less time on actually blocking things. So anytime you can do things that cut out of your opponent's practice plan, I think that's a pretty good way to go about things. So, special teams this offseason for me are going to be huge. Studying those things and seeing the creative ways that people are now you know, how are they kicking off? What are they doing on field goal? What are they doing on swinging gate, muddle huddle? What are they doing on punt? What are they doing on punt block? Um, and it's probably going to be the college game, to be honest with you, because analytically, when you watch the NFL game, I think with the new kickoff rules, 90% of the teams you see now are kicking the ball out of the back of the end zone and giving the other team the ball at the 30. I talked about this last week a little bit on our live chat, but I think kickoffs change in the NFL, but I think after studying analytics, I think guys realize that, hey, look, even if the ball's at the 30, our best bet is still kicking it out of the back of the end zone. The kickoff team that we need to field, the bodies that we need, the work that we need to do in coverage. If you got a guy that just kicks it into the bleachers or out of the back of the end zone every time, you save yourself a ton of time, effort, roster spots, and a lot of other things that are involved in covering kicks and doing. Now, obviously, those guys don't get to take the week off. You still got to do drills. You still got to practice. You still got to work speed zone. You still got to work button press, and you still got to work all the rules of kickoff and what kids, especially at the high school level, need to understand. But at the same time, if you're going to kick it out of the back of the end zone 95% of the time, you feel really good during the week, regardless of how much time you got, or if you got to enough drills, or how the drills went, or practices that were good or bad on special teams. If the guy's going to kick it out of the back of the end zone, you can save yourself a lot of trouble. But most of us in this profession, especially high school football, Pop Warner football, junior high, football, whatever level you're at, we can't kick it out of the back of the end zone. So we're going to have to cover. So if we're going to have to cover, or if we're going to have to use multiple kicks, how does the coverage change? How does the responsibilities change to make sure that we are doing the best to cover kicks? And, the amazing part to me is, as big as a factor, or as big as a factor that, special teams are, anytime I do special teams videos on YouTube, they always get the least amount of views. And that's kind of shocking to me, because I would think that that's the place where you could make your mark and be different. That's the place where you can equal talent out a little bit, or at least swing momentum in games when the other team is better than you on offense and defense. But for whatever reason, special team stuff never becomes the hotness that offense and defense stuff. It never becomes the trend like offensive and defensive structures, or RPOs, or route combinations, or option teams, or sim pressures, or creeper pressures, or three high, or whatever it may be. Like, those things become the thing that everybody wants to study. But yet, so many guys will talk to you about special teams and how you can win and lose on special teams, but then they don't really take the initiative to make special teams as important as offense and defense. So, for me, that's going to be a big deal, is studying a lot of that stuff in the off season and seeing what people are doing. Analytically, I want to go back and look and see how many. It almost seems like the tempo teams aren't having as much success as they used to. As far as the true tempo teams, I don't know how many true hurry up, no huddle teams there are out there that play at that pace all the time. I think we've now gotten back to a world where football has become more about the change of tempo than the tempo itself. So I think guys are playing with multiple tempos from the huddle, multiple ways to change the pace of what they're doing. But if you look at the landscape of college football, I don't know how many teams are still just up on the ball, ripping and running, doing what they do. I think tempo has now become a part of people's offense, and it's, for what I watch at least and see, it's not as much people's offense anymore. It's more a part of what they do. And to me, tempo was always an operating procedure. It was never really an offense. You can't say you're a tempo team. You could say that you're a HUNH, hurry up no huddle team, and use the shorthand lingo that makes everybody think that it's good football. But you could say you're a hurry up no huddle team. You could say you're a tempo team, but at the end of the day, that's not really the structure of your offense. Hurry up no huddle teams, tempo teams, you still have base runs that you need to accomplish, that you need to work on and get good at. You still have base passes, quick game, drop back screens, like all the other stuff. So, to say that you're just a tempo team or a hurry up no huddle team, I think that's not really, that's an operating procedure of what you do. That's a way that you can be effective on offense within your philosophy, but that's not really who you are or what you do. So, the thing that I always argue to people all the time about tempo is, I felt like we got way more reps in practice because of how we operated on offense and defense. And we worried less about scout cards and less about exact fronts. And we worried more about operating procedure. We worried more about getting plays in and out, getting lined up in formations and playing as fast as we possibly could. And then obviously philosophically, you've got to have more built-in answers, to certain looks because you're not always checking or finding your way into the best play. But I just felt like it was always a better way for us to practice. I felt like at least on offensive days, we could keep the kids engaged longer because we were constantly trying to rip and being at a high tempo and not having scout cards and not having all these different exotic looks. And, we were very, very, vanilla by nature, tempo team. We didn't have a ton of formations. We didn't have a ton of shifts, trades, motions. We were just kind of get up and do our thing. And, um, if I had to do it again or if I get a chance to do it again, I would certainly be more multiple with formations and shifts and things that we do. But I would still to this day be some version of a tempo team because I want to practice that way. I want the mindset to be that way. I want to get as many reps as possible. I want our kids to be able to handle tough situations. Like if you want to, diagram, thank you, Rock. If you want to diagram, hey, we got these certain plays to certain fronts that we have to block a certain way and the quarterback has to check us into them. I think you could certainly do that. But then again, your practices slow down. You got to make sure that the scout team is shaded the exact way you need them. And you got to make sure that they're going to do exactly what you drew up on a scout card. And a lot of times when we were tempo, we never had scout cards. We just told our defense to play our defense and line up. And, we would at times on scout team, we would make it to where they were odd or they were tight or they were even or they were under or they were 3-3 stack. And, we would change it up so that our guys had to see different things and block different things. But as far as the overall game plan to say that all right, against this front we need to run this play this way and we got to get checked into it and it needs to be an alert or a kill or a can. Yes, it's good football. Yes, it's probably really smart football, but I just felt like that never worked for us. I felt like our practices sucked. We slowed down too much. The scout teams having to read the cards would line up wrong, and then you would get the plays checked to the wrong thing. So, to me, tempo is always going to be something that we do, something that we try to do, something that we hang our hat on, something that we try to base our weight room stuff on and our off-season training and, our philosophy, or philosophically how we are is always going to be, more about that. But looking back on it again, if I had to do it again, I would be more multiple formationally. I would find ways to shift trade motion because I know those are the things that give us problems on defense. But I would also find ways that we were going to do it at a really, really fast pace because I still think that's a way to kind of even the playing field out. I still think that that's a way to kind of, cut the legs out of some people that might be better than you, as opposed to lining up and saying, all right, we've got a couple really good wrinkles that we like, but we got to block them right. We got to get them called the right way. I think if you could use the tempo to your advantage. Now, obviously, if you're a tempo team and you go 3 and out every down, that's not very good. Just to say that you rip tempo, but if you suck, the tempo is not really an answer. So all things considered, you still got to be good. You still got to, have schemes. You still got to have runs that you like. You still got to have passes that you like. But I just think tempo makes practice easier. I think it makes the mindset. It's easier to build a mindset of kids and a program and a culture around those things. So, that is what I would do. What's everybody's thoughts on the college playoff? Obviously I'm an Alabama fan. Alabama snuck their way in. I don't know if they deserve to be in over some of those teams. I think your duo issues are around how effective your tight end is. I don't know if they're necessarily based around that in general. I think the tight ends usually almost, if you're a duo scheme, the tight end's always going to be a double. He's always going to be somebody that's got help. So I don't think he's got to be that big of a dude. I think your duo issues, kind of stem around the fact, can you move people off the ball? Are you physical enough to knock people off the ball? Can you get knocked back? Can you create the things that you need to create in that type of system for it to be effective? I as far as is it just the tight end? I would say no. That's just my opinion. But obviously, the tight end's a big part of it. But um, I would think to me that to me, tight end stuff, especially 11 personnel stuff, the more he's off the ball and he's a guy that can move and he's a guy that can double team on duo, but he could also work the backside and zip the backside of a kick scheme or, split flow scheme, a guy that can wrap on counter, a guy that can kick out on power, but a guy that you can travel. Um, as far as having a guy that you can travel pre-snap and post-snap, right? So he could be a fast motion guy to get a number. He could do it post-snap like split flow. He could do it pre-snap, and you could have you know shifts, trades, or motions that change the strength or change you know leverage and numbers for the defense. I think to me the Y off guy is the better way to go, but that's just my opinion. Um, I don't know if I like the landmark of how the back would hit it from the other side. I would think to me, it's either a front side or a pistol deal, just because of what the back needs to do. Uh, Again, like anything else I've done or anything else I've talked about, I don't think it's impossible to do it. You could try it with the back away, but I just think the mesh of where he's going to be and what he needs to do as far as his hips and shoulders and his reads, I don't know if the back away is going to get that done. But I would certainly, I would certainly think if you wanted to try that, you could certainly try that. I just think it's built more to be a pistol play or a same side play, simply because of the landmark of the back and what he needs to do. Curiosity, how would you make corrections with tempo during practice? I understand getting maximum reps, but how do you balance making sure that? I think you've got to build in. To me, you got to build in some teaching segments to where, like you go with, let's say you go with an RPO period or something like that, where you've got all your RPOs, access throws built in, and you got to do it in a team setting, and you want to rip it because you want the tempo, to match how you're going to play. I think one of the things you could do now. The interesting thing is with a lot of these, like we had one this year that when it worked, it was really good. Like you have all these sideline boxes now that come with TVs in them and speakers to where you could bring those out to the field. Um, and if you have the staff that can do it and you have the capability to do it, you could have that out on the field playing music during practice. And then you could also have a TV set up to where, depending on whether you were using your end zone camera or a drone or whatever you were using, if you're for us, like we were Game Strat, if we could get our Game Strat sideline replay hooked up during practice, and after we filmed this segment, so if we did, let's say, a 10-minute up tempo skeleton period, and we were trying to line up as fast as we could and rip passing plays. Well, if we want to do corrections, we could build a period after that. So, you could build in, whether it's just like a water break, right, or something else, you could build in a 5 or a 10-minute period where after the skeleton, you bring the kids over and you watch film, or you go through corrections that you need to make. You break them up individually and say, all right, here's the things that we need to work on based on what we saw. If you don't have video, you don't have a drone, you don't have anything else, you look at some of the mistakes and you go, all right, receivers, go over there and work on that. Backs, you need to work on this, and quarterbacks, you need to work on that. I think if you want to continue to teach and fix a lot of those things, you have to have some periods built into practice where you give yourself a chance to do that. And if you're practicing the right way and your reps and your tempo and your pace is good enough in your periods, you'll probably find that you have 10 to 15 minutes in a practice to do that. Now, I think you got to be really specific of what the actual issues are. I think you got to, the biggest thing is coaching your staff on what it's like to be a tempo team, right? So coaching your guys what it's like to keep a practice moving, and especially O-line guys that want to stop something every time a play happens on the double teams or whatever it is, or the leverage, or, it's like, no, we're ripping for 15 minutes. If you see something that's that important while we're in between plays, you better be talking to a kid. You better be coaching in between plays, because we are not stopping what we're doing just to make corrections, right? So obviously you have to find a way to make corrections. You can't just run plays with no corrections. But to me, it's can you build a system where you replay things? You have your replay out there during practice, and you could have a TV or things where you could watch them, and you could build in a 10-minute period after, it could be corrections period where you're watching it on film. It could be a walkthrough period where you're fixing things with the entire group that you screwed up. It could be an individual period where you're sending guys off to say, all right, you guys need this, you guys need that, you guys need that. But I think you would need to me, to be that type of tempo team, you got to build in some periods where it's just corrections. It's just fixing things that you didn't touch in team periods. But like I said, if the tempo is great and the philosophy matches what you're trying to do, then I think you should have more free time than you would in a regular practice when it would take you so much longer to have scout cards and line things up and talk about corrections and stop and go, hey, check, hold on, line this up again, walk through it. Um, I get it that there's times where you need to do that, but most of the time it just kills the practice, waters everything down, and it's hard to get kids back from that. So, um, but I appreciate all of you guys being here tonight. Obviously, we've been on for 51 minutes now on a Tuesday night. Appreciate you all being here. Thank you. Thanks to you guys for joining us on this Tuesday night. Going to try and do it every week at least, for as long as we possibly can. Again, this is my way of being able to answer questions, you guys being able to ask questions live. Obviously, we've talked about the feasibility of what it would be like for me to have a board or something behind me that I can draw on. But, at the end of the day, it's with all the videos that are out there and all the things that you're watching that we do on YouTube, you can watch them and then you can comment afterwards. And I got to reply to comments. This is the one setting where even though you can't be on a screen speaking and I'm not sharing my screen with video, this is the one setting where you have questions that you can ask. You can figure out, what you're thinking about and how you're thinking about it. It's one of those deals that I want to continue to do this because I think it's the best way to have interaction between me and a fan base. I'm not in love with it from the pistol. I think you beat the backside guard there, depending on how you're going to handle, if you're going to go downhill and then bounce, you would have to work on that a bunch. But I think the timing of it is kind of screwed up from the pistol because of the guards pulling and, possibly outrunning those guys. So that would be my one concern, but if you could find a way to do it and make it look like an inside run and then bounce it into the buck sweep, I think that would be your best bet, personally. But, but again, it's you guys being here, interacting, being able to do this live and being able to answer questions and have the chat going on while we're doing it is certainly, again, it's important to me because I do all my videos talking into a camera. I have no idea who's listening. I have no idea who's on the other end. 100 people. 100 people may watch it. 1,000 people may watch it. 50,000 people may watch it. I don't know. I never know that when I do a video. So at least alive, I know who's here. I know how many people are here. I know the questions. I know the chat. I know everything we're doing. So again, I enjoy doing this. I'm going to continue doing it on a weekly basis. Then I could also give you guys updates on things that we have going on with PlayFast and where we're going to be in the off season, what clinics we're trying to get to so that maybe we can meet up and talk football in a live setting. So thanks for being here on Wednesday night. Thanks for joining us. And I know you're busy. I know you have family. I know it's the off season, but if you're here, that means you love football the same way we do. And I appreciate you guys for that. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for all the chat. Thanks for all the questions. If you have any other questions, you can always send them to me. Email Sting, STING 8740 @gmail.com, or you can just leave a comment on a YouTube video or Twitter @CoachMac8740. So, yeah, Rock, that would be awesome. If you're down, you're probably going to be down here more than I'm up there, but would certainly love to get together when we can. So, again, thanks for all you do. Thanks for supporting PlayFest. Thanks for being here tonight. Hope your off season is great. Hope your Thanksgiving holiday went great. I hope you're getting ready for Christmas and all that is safe for you and you have an enjoyable time off and, enjoyable recharge the batteries, so to speak, but also enjoying the holidays with your family. So you won't always play well until you play fast. You won't play well until you play fast. And I will see you guys next time.